the first time in 5 years, we have co-favorites, people, to win the college football playoff. Georgia and Ohio State are both plus 325 at ESPN BET to be the last team standing in the new 12-team playoff format. ESPN BET also has a market taking those two teams versus the rest of the field. The two favorites can be had at plus 120. The other 132 teams in college football minus 165. Keep in mind,
look out for Texas State.
Let's watch out for that Texas State squadron. We have not seen one of the top two preseason favorites win it all, Joe, since 2018. Clemson, the last program to do that. I thought that was kind of a shocking stat that we unearthed. So the question's simple for you: Georgia, Ohio State, or the field?
Thank you, yes. Georgia and Ohio State. I'll take that at plus 120. Georgia, I have projected in 9 of 12 games to be a double-digit favorite. Ohio State, I have projected to be a double-digit favorite in 10 of 12 games this season. For those reasons and others, I see those two winning their respective conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, right? If you win those two conferences, guess what? You're getting a first-round bye in the playoffs. And if you're getting a first-round bye in the playoffs, that means you'll start postseason play with 8 teams remaining. Win one playoff game, one singular playoff game for each team where they wouldn't be facing each other. And now I've got 2 teams in the Final Four, and from there it is on like the former Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan, okay? So that's why I see it. I like the path for both of them. I think maybe one loss on the schedule for each still gets you the conference. Big question here, who's the 3rd best team in the country?
Oregon, Texas.
Who's the 4th best team in the country? I think there's a drop-off. Ohio State quarterback, there is concern. But overall, I think once you get past those two, there are big question marks with a lot of those contenders.
Here's a spot where I disagree with you, buddy.
Despite all that?
Yeah, despite all that, plus the geopolitical historical lesson that you threw at me there with Azerbaijan. I'm on the other side. I'll take the field here.
Okay.
I want to embrace the first year of a 12-team playoff, some chaos. We've never seen this format before, so it's going to be new for all of these teams. Add in, which is still in its infancy, the boom of NIL money and the transfer portal and how quickly teams can change their roster. And there's another factor that compounds that potential chaos. So with a playoff format, a true playoff format with 12 teams, I'm going to embrace them. I think there's going to be an upset. I'm not even sure on paper Ohio State and Georgia. It's not like they're returning a national champ that has every single starter on both sides. I'm not sure they win their conferences. I understand why they're a favorite, but I could see both teams being knocked off in their own conference. So I'll embrace that chaos, take the field.
Georgia has the road game at Bama early in the season. Both teams will be coming off a bye for that matchup. Georgia's matchup with Texas looks daunting until you realize Texas plays Oklahoma the week before. That is a horrendous back-to-back for the Longhorns. You got to play your most hated rival, then host Georgia 7 days later. I think that's a great spot for the Bulldogs to notch that win.
I think they'll both be there. I just don't think either's the last team standing.
Lots of big-name programs will have new homes, and we'll see some matchups that we haven't previously seen in the regular season. The new 17-team ACC extends all the way to the Pacific Ocean now, with the addition of Cal and Stanford from the Pac-12, as well as SMU from the American Athletic Conference. The brand new Big 12 will look very different, now with 16 teams. Both Texas and Oklahoma are off to the SEC, while former Pac-12 members Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah will join the fold. In addition to Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, and BYU, who all entered the league in 2023. The Big Ten will now have 18 teams from coast to coast, after adding 4 schools from the Pac-12 in USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. And the SEC is also expanding west. The conference is up to 16 members with the addition of rivals Oklahoma and Texas from the Big 12. Man, that is a lot to digest. The good news is this reshuffling will bring us new matchups, new rivalries, and bring bragging rights to fan bases across the country.
The preseason AP poll coming out today, and the college gridiron top 6 teams match the top 6 favorites in the betting market. Georgia gets the nod as the AP #1 team for the 2nd straight year, with Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, and Bama rounding out the top 5. Joe, around here at ESPN, there are some analysts who are just kind of new to gambling, and it's okay because it's not been around for that long, at least at this level. Then there is our college football analyst, Greg McElroy, who knows his way around a football wager. That's why we love chatting with him. Greg, how you doing, bud?
Gentlemen, it's so good to be with you. We got a big opportunity on our hands coming up this year. New realignment. You just heard Herb Street going through all the different changes. A lot of stuff to be excited about in our world.
Well, let's start with your alma mater, the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't know if they're excited, but it is a new dawn of a new era, I should say, post-Nick Saban. They start number 5 in the preseason poll. Kalen DeBoer now on the sideline there. Their win total juiced under 9.5 wins. Do you see the Tide getting to 10 dubs this year?
Oh, gentlemen, why not start a little close to home for me, all right? Make me feel comfortable before we dive into the deep end of the pool. Look, nobody will discredit Nick Saban, ever. The greatest program builder in the history of college football. But he is not Jaden Daniels. By my count, you guys double check this. Just double check with your experts back at home. Did he win the Heisman last year? I don't believe he did. Could have, potentially, but didn't. I do think Nick Saban's fingerprints are still very much on the Tide. And that's why I think the overreaction in the market right now to the under is way too aggressive. Don't get me wrong. I look at just how absurd the schedule is at Wisconsin. Georgia comes to them, at Tennessee, at LSU. Missouri's a top 10, a top 11 team. These are all teams that are ranked in the top 10 or 12, with the exception of Wisconsin. That's a tricky, tough game in the non-conference. But I think the Tide's fared very well against Georgia. They're 2-1 against Georgia since 21. They've handled Tennessee 15 of the last 16. They've beaten LSU at their place multiple times. So I like the way they set up, and I like their chances of being able to get on the over here.
Okay, let's transition to the team that bludgeoned your alma mater in the playoff last year. There's several ways I could have phrased that. Michigan, win total at ESPN Bet, open 9.5. If this is interesting, they've dropped it to 8.5. Elsewhere in the market, it's 9. Not a lot of love for the Wolverines. I've got them as outright dogs in 3 games, not including that road trip to Washington, which could be problematic. What do we think about the defending champs this year?
Well, I know that they're ranked number 9 in the AP poll. I know it's the second lowest preseason ranking for a defending national champion since Auburn back in 2011. So I know that this team is really undervalued, not just in the market, but also win totals and in the AP poll. So it's the trifecta of distress. And I think it's reasonable. They lost so many pieces offensively. There's a lot of question marks, I think, with what comes in at quarterback. We're assuming it's Alex Orji. And you referenced a second ago, Joey. I mean, look at the schedule. It's a brutal schedule. You referenced it. Dogs against Oregon, dog against Texas, dog on the road at Ohio State. I know they've won 3 in a row, but this is a different Ohio State team that's going to run the football. They went one of those 3. That's great. You still have to take care of SC. You still have to take care of Michigan State, who's pretty good. You still have to go on the road to Washington, who's certainly had you circled all offseason. So I think this thing falls right at 9. I think the move is justified, but man, it's tough to play the under at 8.5.
Greg, I want to move to a new team in the SEC, Texas. One of my favorite win total wagers coming into the season is the Longhorns under 10.5. They lost a lot of premium talent to the NFL. It is hard to replicate the success they had last year. Oh, yeah, and they're playing an SEC schedule. So are you with me that we'll see at least 2 losses on the Longhorn schedule this season?
You two are just too predictable. I know you. We've done this too long for me not to know where you're going. I already know your cards before you played them. And that was a perfectly justifiable reason. I think based on what they've been in the past, right? Look on paper, Texas's roster is as good as anybody. Their additions in the transfer portal, their quarterback play, their defensive line, how they've been able to go and get great difference makers at wide receiver. But I've also looked at last year's team whose roster was as good as anybody's, and they played to the level of competition multiple times. You're seeing clips right now against TCU. They beat a 5-7 TCU team by 3. They needed overtime to beat Kansas State. They looked really sloppy offensively against Iowa State. So you're telling me when they show up and play their C-plus game in the SEC, they don't drop one against maybe at Arkansas, against a Kentucky at home, against a Florida at home? Those are perfectly reasonable. The level of competition is up significantly. So Longhorns' consistency has to be up consistently. I, of course, like you, I'm leaning towards the under in this scenario for sure.
All right, here's a knuckleball for you. I like Utah this year, which is something I've said every single year since this show started almost 6 years ago. Kyle Whittingham, I think, is the head coach. This team is positioned to transfer into the Big 12 well. They like to build in the trenches. O and D line, Cam Rising back at quarterback. Win total's 9.5. 12 games. I got him as a dog in one spot. It's late September in Stillwater against the Cowboys, and I have him as a small dog there. 3 losses beats me on the over 9.5. Agree or disagree?
I can't play the under here. I'm with you. I like the over. I look at how they match up against the teams in the league. And if you wanted to beat Utah the last few years, you had to beat them on the perimeter. Well, guess what? People think Big 12, oh, Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech throwing it all over the yard. Y'all, that is not the modern Big 12. It's a ground and pound league. Guess who grounds and pound as well as anybody? Utah. They've lost in the Pac-12 because there's teams that could out-athlete them, like SC and other teams like Oregon. That's not the Big 12. They're going to be trying to win along the lines of scrimmage. Who got to the Big 12 title game last year? Oklahoma State. How? By running the football with the Doak Walker Award-winning Ollie Gordon. So this is a ground and pound league that will be determined at the line of scrimmage. So I, like you, especially with the return of Cam Rising, feel great about Utah transitioning to a new league.
He knows how to butter us up, this McElroy, doesn't he? Now, here's where we really get the good stuff from Greg. He can go to any college program in the entire country. Let's start with the team out there you see in the win market that is most overvalued.
Well, I'm from Dallas-Fort Worth, so this one hurts a bit. SMU. SMU, there's a lot of buzz about the Ponies. Oh, they're back in the ACC. They have a manageable schedule. I see this number sitting at 8.5, and I think to myself, well, hang on. They won 11 last year. I got to hop on the over. That's a no-brainer, right? Easy with that logic. Last year, they were 11-0 against Group of 5 teams. They were 0-3 against the Power 5. They lost significantly to both Oklahoma and TCU, and also lost to Boston College, who's in the ACC. They play them on November 16th. You look last year at the Power 5 newcomers in the Big 12, UCF, BYU, Cincy, and Houston. They won a combined 4-24 against legacy Big 12 teams. Making this transition is extremely difficult from the G5 to the P5. So while I think SMU is well equipped to have some success, to think they can get the 9 in the regular season, I just can't see it.
All right, similar question. Let's flip it upside down. Who's one of the most undervalued teams in college football this year?
When you think about disrespect of great college football organizations, who doesn't just go straight to the Rutgers Scarlet Knights? I mean, how do you not just think, I'm going to Piscataway, give me a little Scarlet Knight, give me a little Schiano, that's what I want. But I look at the recipe for this team. They are the biggest beneficiary in the sport by getting rid of divisions. Guess what? They don't have to play Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State every year anymore. Maryland, they get a somewhat manageable schedule. They won the Big Ten lottery. They really did. They avoid all top 5 teams. They really have a legitimate chance to get to 4 Big Ten conference wins. They got a veteran defense. They got a brutally physical offensive line. They got a workhorse at running back, and they replace a quarterback that completed 47% of his passes last year with a guy that has started in the Big Ten and Ethan Kaliakmanis. So I really like Rutgers this year. I think they're undervalued based on history, but when you look at what they bring back and the schedule, it sets up for a real solid season.
Look at Tony Soprano over there. Rutgers getting no respect. This is why we love him. Can't wait to chat all college football season long. Thank you, Greg.
See you, fellas.
Give me something. Try to sing